Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez and you are listening to episode number 611. On this episode, we talk about current event news, more specifically the submersible named Titan from OceanGate and the recent tragedy that happened where the submersible went lost at sea for quite some time. Nobody knows exactly what happened. Reports are still coming out, but it is believed that 5 individuals that were on the submersible have lost their lives at this point. And we talk about some of the history of sea exploration, movies that involve stories pretty much like Jaws, fears of the ocean and what lies beneath as far as the deep dark depths of the sea. And we just talk about some of the deep-seated fear that humans and mankind have in general when it comes to that sort of topic. It's always a tragedy whenever there's a loss of life, so we try to tackle this with some kind of seriousness. I mean, we do have moments where we laugh. We do it just to kind of let off steam a little bit, but it's an unfortunate loss any way you cut it, and we report on it as best as we know how. On a lighter note, we also talk about The Flash, the recent movie with Ezra Miller, Michael Keaton, Sasha Calle. It's a retelling of the Flashpoint Paradox storyline from the comics and the animated version. It's an adaptation, so it's not exactly what you would expect from the comics where it originated from. But I give my take on it. I recount some of the story points for Doug, and I try not to spoil the whole movie, but I do get into a lot of the different details. So if you have not watched The Flash yet, be prepared. There are spoilers ahead, but I try to leave a few things out here and there. I give my thoughts, my more or less review, and my ramble on it. That's the best way I can put it. With that being said, we are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us under the podcast section. We are also on YouTube. Check us out, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Make sure you check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast. Email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. And you can find the show where it always lives, Rabblecast, rabblecast.libsyn.com. That's about it. If you have any thoughts on what happened with the Titan submersible, or if you have any ideas or thoughts, comments, or opinions with The Flash, email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and everybody has their own opinion. So it's great to get those out and in a constructive and a very mature manner. No, I don't know. Do whatever which way you want. Just don't give me too much grief. I have my opinion. You have yours. Let's be adults. That's about it. Hope you enjoy, and on with the show.
All right, here we are, another episode.
You're getting good at this, huh?
Yes, I'm finally figuring stuff out. It's like riding a bike. You never forget how, but you have to refresh yourself a little bit.
There you go. And as you know, we're recording.
Yes.
So how the hell you been?
Shit, piss, and corruption.
Oh, really? What happened?
And nothing specific. It's just, I trust nothing and I trust no one.
As you should, because in this day and age, who can you trust?
No one. Not even yourself. Especially not yourself.
Yeah, no, you never know what's going to happen. Shit, like half the time. It's funny, sometimes I'll miss out on certain, I don't know, I guess you could say, good night of sleep, to the point where I'll wake up the next day. I'm like, did I actually go to bed, or is this a dream? So you walk around for like a few seconds, like, no, let's poke this, let's move that, pinch myself. Okay, no, I think we're awake. I think we're good. But every now and then you'll get something like, shit, I'm late for work, and you wake up again. You're like, oh no, wait, I'm in bed. I'm good. It's Saturday. Shit. Okay.
Yeah, I've had that a couple of times where I wake up and I'm just like, what? Yeah, you get that 5 to 10 seconds of just utter complete disorientation before everything kind of snaps back into place. Not a fan of that.
No, not at all. By chance, do you still have, or have you ever, I don't know, have that dream where you wake up and you think you're late for school?
No, mine is late for work. I haven't had the late for school dream in a long time.
I have those once in a blue moon still, and they kind of freak me out because I still remember my combination for my locker.
Really?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. And I don't ever think
Huh.
about it until I'm actually needing to go to school. But for some reason, it's like somewhere in the back of my head. I couldn't recall it right now, but in my dream, I recall it like no problem.
Wow,
It's
that's
an
impressive.
it's an odd memory that's tucked away and suppressed. I don't know. It always seems kind of weird.
Especially considering the fact that, wait a minute. So, how many lockers did you have in high school?
One.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, I got a new locker every year.
When I was in middle school, I think we moved. Depending on the classroom that you had, you were assigned a new locker. Depending, like it was adjacent to it, or at least in the proximity of. But in high school, once we got assigned our homeroom, that was it. Like you got your locker and you stayed there, and unless something else happened, you didn't get a new locker assigned.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I changed every single year because I was constantly they changed every single homeroom every year. So, hmm.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah, so I couldn't tell you any of my locker combinations because I had six locker combinations between 1992 and 1998. So,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Have you been keeping up with the recent current events of the submersible that goes underwater to do tours of the Titanic wreckage?
Oh, yes, I have.
And it's funny because when I first, you and I had a text message back and forth, and when I first thought about covering this, I mean everybody's talking about it. First off, it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to avoid. But as I realized when you and I were going to sit down and record, and when their deadline was for a tentative rescue, I was like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
isn't really like current event news anymore. This is slowly becoming a horrible event in history."
Yeah, fundamentally speaking, yes.
And it has all the hallmarks of a horrible event in history that you've done in the past. For anybody who's listened in the past to the podcast, Doug would do his segment at the end every now and then. It wasn't set to a specific time or episode, but he would do his research and find moments in history that were just batshit crazy, downright creepy, or outright tragedy. And this one, this one sadly fits the bill.
Yeah, this one checks a lot of boxes for people.
So what do we know so far? The submersible itself, what was it? Ocean. I'm blanking on that.
OceanGate was the company.
Okay. They constructed this really weird submersible that had what was it? Carbon fiber for the hull. Am I correct?
It was carbon fiber, and there was also titanium in the build. I've heard. The thing is, like, I tried to find spec on the submersible, but it was tough to find straight information. I found some stuff saying that it was made out of carbon fiber, others saying that there was like titanium used on it, some saying like the hull was like 5 inches thick. So other things said that this thing was not rated for anywhere near the depths they were going to. So it's been tough finding like reliable information. Like I'm actually when they found the wreckage, which I think they said that they found the wreckage of the thing about 1,600 feet away from where the Titanic sits.
Yes,
And
roundabout. Yeah.
I'm hoping that it'll get to the point where they can recover some of it, because I'd really, really, really love to see some type of an analysis of this is what we got and here's actually what went wrong. So,
And let's see. They were, what was it? Five individuals. Among those, including the CEO of OceanGate, correct?
okay, let me see if I can do this off the top of my head. You had the CEO of OceanGate, who's apparently a real dick. Well, was a dick. The guy who was actually piloting the submersible, who I think he was a former French sea captain of some degree or another, a British billionaire, another guy who was an explorer, and the explorer, and like that guy who was, I think, in his 50s or so, and I want to say like his 20-year-old kid.
I believe
And
you're
that
right.
rounds out your, yeah, I think that rounds out the cast of characters on this one.
And this is a trip they've done a few times. So the idea is you would pay, what was it, $250,000 ahead.
Yes.
You'd book this trip, and the idea is that they would take you underwater all the way down to where the Titanic rests. And it seemed kind of like a routine excursion for them, only that past employees of OceanGate had raised flags saying, hey, that submersible probably needs a little bit more testing. It probably isn't the best materials used. It's probably not going to be rated for extended use, and things should be changed and or upgraded. I believe one of the lawsuits that came up was that the CEO sued one of the former employees because they were, quote unquote, divulging company secrets.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that story pop up as well.
And that also the CEO, former CEO at this point, was saying that safety is a waste of time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want something written on your grave when something like this happens, it's not the greatest thing to say about somebody, but like you said, he was not well liked by many people to begin with, but he was willing to go out there and just put it all on the line, essentially doing all these different excursions down there. And don't get me wrong, they did it plenty of times, so it worked. But even one former guest or tourist had mentioned that he has a video of them going down there, and they got stuck on the propeller of the Titanic as they were trying to come back up to the surface, and they were stuck for about a good 2.5 hours, from the story said. And he was kind of freaking out, as you would, because you're all the way down near the ocean floor. You're not entirely sure if this thing is going to pop off of whatever wreckage it's stuck on, or debris. But when they finally got out, and he was relieved, but he was pretty much cashing it in at that point. Like, that's it, I'm done. This is how it ends. And thankfully they got back. Everything was fine. I think he has like a souvenir video of the whole thing. But it's not the first.
No, I think you're.
Go ahead.
I think you might be a little off base. The guy who, so this was a guy who used to work for one of the major news networks who got sent down about 20 years ago.
Was it that
He
long
went
ago?
down. Yeah, I want to say either 2000 or 2003 is sticking out in my mind.
Okay.
And he got sent down there. I can't remember the reporter's name, but he got sent down, and yeah, they were having some technical issues with it. But that was a different expedition. It's a relatively new phenomenon for private companies to be running expeditions down to the Titanic, because, yeah, I mean, just on the sheer fact that you need some, well, if you're doing it right, I should say you need some pretty serious equipment to go down there and actually get it done properly. Usually the kind of stuff that you'd only see in the hands of like a governmental organization.
Okay, so the story of them getting stuck on the propeller, that was not them, that was somebody else?
I'm pretty sure that was. I fact checked, but I don't want to screw up the call because I've got my phone on it. My phone is laying on my chest and I'm talking to you on it.
No, that's quite all right. The problem with this story was that it garnered so much attention because apparently going down underwater and being trapped and potentially drowning in or suffocating, depending on how you go, is a fear for a lot of different people, apparently.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, can you think about, that's a pretty awful way to die if you think about it.
Absolutely. I mean, even when they have military submarines, that's something that you have soldiers crammed into a tin can and going underwater, and you don't know whether you're going to live or die, or if you're even going to, resurface at that point. It's kind of dicey. I mean, if you get hit with a missile underwater, that's it. You're done. Like, as soon as the ship starts taking water, there's very little you can do to, salvage the operation and or the crew. So for this guy to be taking trips down to the ocean floor for this, I mean, granted, it was in the spirit of exploring and everything else. I'm sure he was liking the money as well, but it's weird, like all the different stories and a lot of people recapping different sites. A lot of things were pretty much copy and pasted with slight updates here and there, so it was kind of hard to really like track all the information outside of who was on the submersible, when they went missing, and around about how much time they had left for oxygen. Which we should say at this point, as of 6 a.m., I believe Eastern time, they were saying on June 22nd is roundabout when they ran out of air. So had they not passed already due to asphyxiation or any other, problems or trauma, that their air supply had definitely been run out. So even if they said, had they found them late last night, they would still have trouble trying to open the damn thing up and getting them to proper rescue or, attempting to salvage anything out there. Even if they had resurfaced themselves, because early on they thought that the submersible had problems with the resurfacing mechanism, something may have malfunctioned, that even if they had resurfaced themselves, they probably could be bobbing in the ocean for hours on end, and if nobody was there to unbolt them from the outside, they could not release themselves, and they would still possibly suffocate once the air ran out.
Yeah, that was one of the many problems with the entire thing. But if I'm going to gamble based on what I've heard so far, it sounds like they were somewhere going down into the descent. They got to one of the deeper depths on the way down, and I'm willing to venture that then they had there was some type of complete failure of the submersible. They had people forget how severe the pressure of the ocean is the deeper you get. Like this shit is no joke. I was trying to remember. There's a specific term for it when they lose. If the thing is breached, now all of a sudden, basically the pressure of the ocean just crushes the thing. But with the amount of pressure for this thing, estimates are saying like they probably wouldn't have even had time to feel pain because it would have just been like, thunk, you're done.
Just like a tin can imploding.
Yeah. Well, here I'll give you a good comparison for this. As a reference, I found on Twitter somebody posted a video that Mythbusters did about 13 or 14 years ago, where they tested a myth of the ocean crushing you. So what they did is they took one of those old-timey diving suits that's got the umbilical attached to it, where it's constantly pushing air into the suit through a air compressor.
Mm-hmm.
They took a replica human skeleton, wrapped as much. Of all things, they used pig flesh because apparently pig flesh is very similar to human flesh. And they also added some fake blood into the mix to kind of try to simulate a human body, put it into this diving suit, attached it to a rig, took it out on a boat, took it out a couple miles off the coast of California, and dropped it down to only 300 feet. 300 feet. Which is a mere fraction of what they were playing with, because the Titanic sits, I want to say about 10,000, roughly 2 miles down. So that's what, about 11,000 feet, 10,500 feet, something like that.
I'd have to take your word for it.
Okay, I want to say a mile is approximately 5,200 feet, but I can't quite recall. But anyway, so just at 300 feet. They had this thing down. They had cameras all over the metal rig that they had set up for this thing. They turned off the air compressor, and they literally watched as it slowly pushed all the air back through the line. And then all of a sudden, you just saw like all of the meat and blood and fake blood that they had put inside the suit attached to the skeleton. All of a sudden, you just see everything compressing to the point where it was actually starting to ooze out of part of the diving helmet.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And we're talking a factor of, if they were at 300 feet, multiply that by 30, 40 or so, and that's what you're talking about, the depth down there. So I am never studied physics. This is one time it would have been really handy to have Jimmy on the show because he's got enough of a physics background. He could probably break all this shit down for us.
That's very true.
But where he is right now, it's Friday morning, so not Thursday night. So yeah, we're talking about that when you're getting down to those depths where they were at. Yeah, I got a feeling that thing just just crushed the shit out of them pretty quickly. Which, if I had a choice, I think I'd rather get crushed almost instantaneously by the pressure than basically sit there in darkness waiting to either suffocate or die of hypothermia, whichever came first.
Yeah, that's the other thing. People don't realize how fucking cold it can get down there. Like
Hmm.
the deeper that you get, there's no sunlight, and that water is just ice cold. It,
Literally, in fact, I think it's under 30 degrees.
really, oh my god. And again, this is like playing on a lot of different fears because man already has a fear of the ocean back in the old days, you know, when before they had a good idea or knowledge of the world around them. Whenever they drew up maps of the ocean, that's why they would usually involve like depictions or drawings of different sea creatures because they believe that things would take boats, like when boats would sink or capsize due to storms, that maybe it was like a sea monster or like a overgrown squid or octopus that was pulling them down to the depths. You know, the whole idea of Davy Jones' lockers and all the myth and mysticism that came about through just trying to cross the ocean or sail the seas.
Oh yeah.
So this is like
Well, the
really
ocean ain't nothing. Ocean ain't nothing to fuck with.
very, very deep seated fears, which again, everybody was going nuts over as far as what was happening. Now, here I found, and I'm not going to get into the specifics, but they ran different tests with the submersible itself, and there was a number of problems that they found over time. One of which, when they would use the thrusters to dive deeper to overcome buoyancy, apparently that would interfere with the communication system. Uh, the one thing that people kept talking about over and over again that was kind of annoying was the fact that they said that the navigation system was linked to a $30 Logitech game controller, and that's how the submersible was steered. Which, let's be fair, nowadays game controllers are used for a lot of different things, especially remote control operations. You can find them for drones, RC cars, robotics use them quite a bit. You know, the idea of using an Xbox controller or Microsoft controller or even like Logitech, it's not outside the realm of possibility. Everybody just assumes it because, oh, it's for games. That's like a kid's toy. No, in this case, it was probably used as it should have been, but just unfortunately with all the other laundry list of problems that this thing possibly had, it was just something that people were picking out left and right.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, at first I heard that and I felt I had the same knee-jerk reaction, but somebody else I read somewhere raised the point of, well, if anything else, we know these things were mass-produced, probably went through half decent quality assurance, which it sounds like the entire operation needed a hell of a lot more of that.
yeah.
So that was probably the most reliable thing on that goddamn sub.
Let's see here. It says during a human piloted descent, which Stockton Rush performed solo on December 10th of 2018, he used vertical thrusters to overcome unexpected positive buoyancy, which I mentioned before. Um, he lost contact with the surface ship for approximately 1 hour. It's fucking terrifying. Rush became the second human to dive solo to 13,000 feet after James Cameron, who in 2012 dove to Challenger deep in the Marinara Trench, approximately 36,000 feet. After these tests were completed in January of 2020, the hull of the Titan, the name of the submersible, by the way, began showing signs of cyclic fatigue, and the craft was derated to 9,800 feet. And how deep is 2 miles, did you say?
2 miles, 5,200 plus 5,200 is about, we'll just call it 10,500 feet. We'll call it a day on that one.
So 10,000 feet, let's say roughly.
Yeah.
This craft was already derated because of the cyclic fatigue. So that means the more it dove, the more trouble it was going to have unless they did some kind of repair or overhaul on it, which apparently they did not. The Spencer built composite cylindrical hull either was repaired or replaced by Electro Impact and Janicki Industries prior to the first trips to Titanic. Okay, so what was used, because I remember you mentioned titanium. I heard carbon fiber, and for the portholes, they were just thick pieces of acrylic.
Yes.
There really wasn't much keeping you safe from the depths of the ocean, and
No.
that already seems kind of janky to begin with. That with the guy's disregard for safety and everything else, and he was catering to a high price clientele. Like the whole thing just sounds really, really off. Like a lot of red flags are going off left and right as you read some of these news stories. And it's unfortunate that we did lose any kind of human life, even if somebody didn't like the guy. I mean, it just, unfortunately, he took other people with him. Yes, they paid their tickets, but I don't think they thought this is the way it was going to go. I don't know about you, but if I want to see Titanic, there is a lot of documentary footage nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Perfectly happy viewing it from my living room or on my phone. I don't have to go down to the depths.
I mean, if nothing else, if you have Disney Plus, they own National Geographic, aka Nat Geo as it's now called. They were the ones who were initially doing the expedition, them and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute with Robert Ballard back in 1985 when they found the thing. I mean, there's at least three Titanic documentaries on Nat Geo right now, or you can go watch Ghost from the Abyss, which is James Cameron's documentary about it that he made when he went down to the thing, and you can even watch that in IMAX if you're so inclined to that kind of thing. It's truly mind-boggling, but I think one of the things that really irks me about it is you've got all these self-styled billionaire adventurers. It's like, who the fuck do you think you are, Scrooge fucking McDuck? It's like, no, I have to go do it. It's like, number one, this has been done before. Number two, if you're going to do it, don't fucking slapdash the goddamn thing. I mean, when they found the Titanic, I mean, it was an unmanned sub called Argo. Do you know the story of actually how the entire thing came about when they found it back in 85?
No, not off the top of my head.
So, are you familiar with Robert Ballard?
Sounds familiar.
So he was the guy who found the Titanic. He's an oceanographer. I think he might even have his doctorate in oceanographic studies at this point. And he was also an officer in the Navy. So back in the 80s, I believe there was some missing nuclear subs that he basically helped find using some of research techniques that he had helped come up with, him and his team. And one of which was this unmanned sub. Well, you got to realize, like, really, really deep diving is a relatively new phenomenon. They have been working on this, but as technology progresses, we're able to go deeper and deeper. I mean, for the longest time, even getting down to like 10 to 15,000 feet was a bit of a chore, just because we didn't have anything strong enough that could handle those pressures. And on top of that, like, even getting down there, like, if you ever go look around and find the old National Geographic pictures of when the unmanned sub Argo went down there in 85, they're blurry. They look like photos from 1985, as compared to like how good like the photography has gotten since then. But technology. The other problems are, like, exactly, as the technology has gotten better and better, we've been able to go deeper and deeper. I mean, we're still not even 100% sure how deep the ocean is. The thing you mentioned before, Challenger Deep in the Marianas Trench, which is, I think, maybe 1,000 miles off the coast of Japan. I mean, they've clocked parts of that down to 35,000 feet. That's as deep as of now is the deepest point in the ocean we are aware of. Are there deeper points? Maybe. We don't know.
Yeah.
And it's wild, too, because, I mean, there's even more, like, Atlantic's deep, Pacific's even deeper. Like, there's some shipwrecks we found only in the last couple of years that are even wildly deeper than that. Are you familiar with the USS Indianapolis?
No.
Okay. USS Indianapolis was a warship during World War II. It's famous for multiple reasons. Number one, it was tasked with a top secret mission back in the summer of 1945 of moving parts of the atomic bomb to the island of Tinian for assembly to be dropped on Hiroshima on August 6th of 45. After that, the ship was on its way down to the South Pacific for its next set of orders. When it was somewhere out in the middle of the Pacific, it was torpedoed, went down, And between the nature of the operation and how secret it was for moving the nuke parts, and also through a couple of miscommunications and some officers fucking up, the ship was never listed overdue.
Really?
Yeah. So I think about 1,000 sailors went into the Pacific. I think it was about 3.5, 4 days later, a reconnaissance pilot was flying overhead, saw the giant oil slick, and said, "You only see those when something big sinks." So he started kind of checking around the area, and he saw just a shit ton of sailors bobbing up and down in the ocean. And yeah, radioed in for help, and they sent out like patrol boats as quick as they could to go pick up whoever they could. I think only about 300 survived.
How many were on the ship?
About 1,000.
Jesus.
Well, you got to realize a lot of them were injured in the sinking of the ship. A lot of the other guys were, there were guys who were eaten by sharks. There were guys who succumbed to madness, and they started screaming, "There's an island right over there," and started swimming off into the distance and were never seen again and were last at sea. This was the entire scene that was made famous in one of the eeriest parts of the movie Jaws. It was the entire scene where when they're all sitting around the first night out at sea, and Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss are both kind of bonding, like showing off their scars and talking about stuff. Robert Shaw starts telling the story about the one scar when the one guy's like, "Oh, what's that?" And he was like, "Oh, it was a tattoo I had removed." And Richard Dreyfuss starts laughing. He's like, "Oh, what did the tattoo say, Mom?" And then he immediately looks at it and says, "Mr. Hooper, the tattoo was for the USS Indianapolis." And immediately the character played by Richard Dreyfuss immediately stops laughing and just looks at him with this like shocked look on his face. And then he delivers that legendary speech. If you or any of our listeners have never seen it, go look it up on YouTube immediately. It is an amazing, amazing bit of acting by Robert Shaw as he recounts the experience of basically being stuck at sea, treading water for days, fending off sharks, wondering if you were ever going to get rescued. And it's so well done, you don't even notice the music slowly comes up in the background. And he just ends it and he looks at them. He was like, 1,000 men went into the water, 300 came out. And he just looks at both guys and he goes, "I'll never put on the life jacket again."
Okay, see, the sad part is, now that you recount that part, I do remember the ship. And it's not from a history lesson. It's not from reading historical books. It's from a fucking movie.
But you want to know what? Any way that people access the information is good. I mean, I actually knew somebody who, when we were talking about it once, and I'll get to the reason I brought all of this up in a second. I actually looked at somebody once and we were talking about it, and I mentioned, it's like, "Oh, did you hear they found the wreck of it?" And he looked at me, he's like, "That's real?" And I was like, yes, it is, man.
Wow.
But the reason I bring this up is they found it either 2017 or 2018. I can't quite recall. And the Indianapolis is sitting at about 20,000 feet deep.
So is it something that can still be visited to this day? Like if you try to do a submersible, kind of like the Titan?
The submersible that went down, oh, fucking hell, I'm trying to remember who found it. I cannot remember off the top of my head. It was definitely not a pleasure. It was not a pleasure cruise, I can assure you of that.
No, of course not.
It may have been Paul Allen. Hold on a second, this is going to bug me. Tell me if you can still hear me. Hold on a second. And that's not even the deepest wreck we're aware of.
Okay, so this one went down in around what time?
This would have been summer 45, so like August 45, give or take. Yeah, terrible podcasting here. Sorry,
not
folks.
at all. Don't worry. Remember, I can clip part of this out. No worries. All right, so...
Oh, here we go. I just found the article. I'm skimming my way through. Blah, blah, blah. Torpedoes, National Geographic. Okay. There we go. Reports estimated that the Indianapolis was actually 25 miles west of reported sinking position in water over 3 miles deep, likely on the side of an underwater mountain. After a discovery of the records, the wreck was located by Paul Allen's USS Indianapolis project aboard the research vessel Petrel, August 19th, 2017, 2017, at a depth of 18,000 feet. And Paul Allen is, oh yeah, he was one of the co-founders of Microsoft with Bill Gates. Okay, he had the money.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
But yeah, so yeah, that was one of those ones where yeah, he threw a ton of money at this one. I'm not sure. I'm willing to say I don't think it was a manned sub. I think it was an unmanned vehicle that they sent down.
As far as the actual discovery of the wreckage?
Yeah. In fact, yeah, you can go in there and just Google USS Indianapolis wreck and you can find pictures of it. It's pretty wild.
That's crazy because, so what year did the Titanic sink?
That was 1912.
Okay, so all right, that would make more sense because one of the other stories that keeps popping up now, especially, is saying that we're running out of time to visit the Titanic, and that's because of the content of the sea are just slowly eating away at the wreckage. So,
Yeah, they found bacteria down there that's eating away at the metal on the ship, and a lot of the wood that was used on it is pretty much long gone. I mean, it's at this point you're talking it's been down there for 111 years, give or take.
yeah, and as has been brought up many a times when people say, once man-made things are left to nature, nature usually reclaims it. In this case, it's the same thing, just that we're underwater. So it's not surprising that eventually the sea would somehow swallow it up or break it down, in this case, breaking it down little by little, and as the years go by. So for the Indianapolis to still be down there, I mean, that's got, 30 years after the Titanic? So...
You got to say, number one, 30 years after the Titanic. So not only 30 years later in terms of sinking, but also 30 years of future military or future technology in terms of shipbuilding.
Yes, better materials, better processes.
Yeah, I'm sure that they had a lot of ways for the old World War II warships versus something that was built in 1910 or 1912 or so. No, I can't remember what year the Titanic was finished. Probably within the first, that was maiden voyage, so probably within a year or two it was completed. But you got to realize, yeah, I'm sure that the technology is better so they can say it's like, well, yeah, this is going to be able to stand up to, because saltwater is great at corrosion. I mean, saltwater will eat through damn near anything if you give it enough time.
Saltwater, not just the water itself, but even being close to the ocean, the salt content in the air will start to corrode things over time as well.
Absolutely.
That's why a lot of arcades on the boardwalks, their games will start to malfunction because the saltwater content in the air that just comes in on the breeze will start to affect the games over a long period of time. That also affected that one apartment building in Florida that after a while was also being affected as the saltwater content was attacking the building. And it's not the sole reason for that one. I mean, there was other problems as well that needed to be addressed that weren't. But the hell was that?
I don't know. I thought that was on your end.
It was, but it's just like the random sounds that happen in this house sometimes. I think that's Jen's computer. It just happens to be unmuted right now, so.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, the saltwater content just even in the air will just wreak havoc over time, and that's left unchecked is something that can cause, as we've seen, just horrendous accidents as well. So it's one thing to complain about electronics. It's another thing when you see an apartment building just collapse on itself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Saltwater did play a role in addition to what was the other cause? Like basically piss poor construction.
Yeah, that one just went hand in hand. The saltwater was just slowly eroding and, eating away at it. And because they didn't address some of the maintenance issues and some of the repairs that needed to be done, especially after some safety inspections, they were slowly, orchestrating this horrible accident that just unfortunately not only destroyed the building, but also claimed many lives.
Yeah, and once again, that circles back to like one of the common themes of horrible events in history. It's usually not malevolence; it's usually greed and apathy that tend to fuck a lot of things up.
It's so crazy. And now with the Titan, one of the things that they were saying about 2 days ago that they were hearing knocking noises at one point as they were using a plane using radar to try to locate it in the ocean. They're not entirely sure what the knocking noise was, or if it even originated from the Titan itself. But that gave some people a little bit of a hope, even though most people were being pessimistic at that point, because it had already been that far deep into the remaining air supply that they weren't sure what they were going to find. But then you had mentioned that they found a debris field, correct?
Yeah, yeah, they found pieces of it like on the ocean floor, yeah, close to the Titanic.
So, I mean, at this point, who knows? Like, unfortunately, the recovery of any type of, bodies at this point, I mean, again, whatever is down there as far as sea life probably had its way with it, got stuck somewhere, maybe under other objects or, I want to say outcroppings, but like formations in the sea, or who knows, or maybe they just got got swallowed up. I don't know. It's unfortunate, and I feel bad for all the families involved. Whether they were nice people or not, it's just a horrible way to go. And again, the fact that this is just playing on a deep-seated fear. Again, you mentioned Jaws. How many people were afraid to go into the water after watching Jaws?
I know I was, and I
Well,
was afraid to go in a lake, for God's sakes.
yeah, same here. For a while, I was having that same problem. But now, how many people are going to be, willing to go into a submersible? How many people are going to be willing to go underwater for like deep sea explorations? I mean, you're going to have your professionals who obviously want to do it and still do it, but it just sucks all around. I don't know.
Well, you want to know what? I think that is one section of tourism that maybe we should not, maybe not, maybe let's not. It's not too dissimilar. It's like, okay, if you really, really want to go down there, go talk to the professionals, maybe do it right. Like, don't be like, I'm going to throw money at this problem and all of a sudden I'll have everybody take care of it for me. It's like, yeah, how about you actually get involved with like a correct, like a research entity or the military? Because I know they do this kind of stuff periodically, rather than it's like, yeah, we're just going to go do this kind of. I don't want to say it was done on a whim because I know a lot of. I know. Interestingly enough, the British businessman who was killed on this expedition, I believe he was one of the people who also made a trip down to the Marianas Trench in a different vehicle. But I think the one he went down on the other time was actually not, made out of crap. Since clearly he survived at that time.
Let me ask you this, because I understand the idea of trying to, again, break new ground, find new adventures, the human spirit, just, pushing forward and always exploring the unknown. I understand that. Would you, given the choice between either going out in space and, like, let's say, rotating the Earth a couple times, or going down to the deepest depths of the ocean, which one would you pick?
Can I pick neither?
That would be the safe bet.
Call me boring, but you know what? I'm gonna go with neither. Well, actually, here, if I had to make an informed choice, and like I was in I have to pick one, or I have to do. If I have to pick one, or I have to do both, kind of deal. It would also come down to who is organizing the trip. Who am I working with on this trip? How much training time do we have for this entire affair? Because if it comes down to like some idiot asshole who started the company who was like, oh, come on down in the sub that we had made probably by the lowest bidder years ago and is already showing times of stress and strain, or getting sent up in outer space by NASA. Maybe I'd rather work with them. Although either way, number one, I don't like confined spaces. Number two, I don't like the ocean, other than maybe wandering up to like maybe my waist in the thing, because yeah, that bitch is mean. I mean, versus, I'm not a fan. I don't even like riding roller coasters, for shit's sakes. What the hell do you think it would be like being in a goddamn fucking spaceship as it's taking off, for Christ's sakes?
Oh, when you have all those G's, the G-force pushing you back into the chair, and you're pretty much swallowing whatever is left in your gut. Your eyeballs are like being sunken into your skull. Yeah, I can understand. It's not a pleasurable experience, probably, but for adrenaline junkies, it's probably the thrill ride of a lifetime. That being said,
absolutely. Yeah.
just like getting shot into space or going down into the depths of the ocean, there's a lot of math and engineering that needs to happen before any of those trips can actually take place. So to
Hmm.
have it go down the way it has in history, where we've seen space shuttles that either blow up as they're leaving the Earth's atmosphere or burning up on re-entry, whatever the case is, and then you have the cases of submersibles, whether they have hull fatigue, if they bang up against something and some kind of like minor crack or abrasion happens, and then the hull is just compromised, or in war times, if you get shot down by a torpedo, and then there's no way of you coming back from those, especially after sustaining massive amounts of damage. And then nowadays, you have to worry about orcas apparently starting to coordinate attacks on large vessels. Did you hear about that one?
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, yeah, either way, everything in the world is just going to conspire to kill you in one shape or another. And human beings as a whole, we're just, soft, fleshy bags of tissue and blood that, let's face it, a good solid hit from anything would probably kill us. But somehow we keep trying to push forward. And I get it. Again, pushing the envelope and trying to find new, I don't know, new adventures, new ideas, new frontiers, whatever the case is. It's just crazy, the
Yeah.
risks that some people take. And I don't even know if you could really call this guy a risk taker. I mean, yes, he went down there initially for the tests and everything else, but really it just started becoming like a business venture for him to keep going down with tourists and charging the amount of money that he was.
I was going to say you don't have to if you're putting 3 or 4 people in your submersible and sending them down. You don't have to make too many trips down there every year to make some serious bank. You think about it. I mean, just on this ship alone, 3 paying customers at 250 a pop. Yeah, that's a $250,000. So,
And you would hope that some of that money, or at least a good majority of that money, would be put towards repairs, maintenance, research and development for advancements, for safer equipment. But as we've already mentioned, safety was not at the forefront for this project. So
I was going to say I think we already answered our own questions by this one. It sounds like he pulled it off a couple of times. He was like, "Good, we got it. We figured it out. Moving on." So not realizing it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why NASA, like, every time they build one of those space shuttles, they've got a limited shelf life. It's not like, oh, okay, we can use this over and over again. It's like we can use this a certain number of times, and after that, it's retired because no amount of maintenance or repairs or anything else is going to make it safe to go up there again. And I mean, you're also talking about when NASA or anybody like that does it, you got tons of redundancies and safety systems. Oh, I didn't ask you. What would you, if you had a choice between, going into orbit and doing a couple laps around the Earth versus a trip to the bottom of the ocean? Which one are you taking there, Haas?
I think I would actually go for, if I was going to choose one, I would actually go for space. Because being able
Really?
to
Okay.
see the Earth, at the very least, like that idea of we're just a big blue marble floating in the void, I would love
Hmm.
to see that from a higher vantage point. Going into the ocean, as far as I can tell, unless you've got like good lighting down there, you're not going to see a damn thing. There's not much to see unless you're going to go for a particular excursion. So, like the Titanic or the Indianapolis, or if you happen to come across some, sunken wreck that's been forgotten by history. But aside from that, I don't want to find out any fucking sea creatures and monsters and come across a megalodon or whatever the fuck actually lives down there. I'd rather avoid that nonsense.
A fair point. We're pretty damn sure nothing lives in orbit, but yeah, who the hell knows what's running around in the ocean? I mean, I think it was within the last 15, 20 years they rediscovered the coelacanth, and they thought that thing had been extinct for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah, who knows what still exists down there? Like as you mentioned before with the Marianas Trench, the fact that it's so deep that we're not entirely sure how deep it goes, or even like the deepest point in the ocean. That's terrifying. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I know man loves the unknown and they love to speculate as to what's happening or what could happen or what lives down there. And then that, brings up all types of stories and adventures and maybe like horrific ideas. But that's not for me. I don't mind sci-fi. I don't mind adventure. But when you get that far down into the depths, so to speak, I'll pass. I'm good with that.
No, and you raised a really good point as well. I mean, unless you have like the high-powered floodlights on, you ain't gonna see nothing. Because I mean, at about 1,000 feet, at that point, I mean, you're getting down into the blackness because there's just light can't punch that far down. And even if you do have lights turned on, if you're 1,000, if you're 10,000, if you're 5,000 feet deep, but you're still 5,000 feet above the seabed, there's nothing. All you're gonna see, it's like as far as the eye can see in every single direction is there's nothing but water. There's no shape, there's no form, there's no nothing. You're basically in a void of nothing but water, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few times where I've gone on fishing trips, and when we're in the bay, it's not that big of a deal. You have a certain amount of sea life that you can catch. It's fun. It's not too bad as far as like sea motion or seasickness. But when you get out into the ocean and you lose sight of land, and all around you in 360 degrees, all you can see is water, it kind of freaks you out a little bit. I mean, you're safe for the most part. I mean, you're putting your trust in whoever's captaining the ship and driving. But if you remove everybody else in the boat, and if it was just you stranded on a boat in the middle of nowhere, you're not sure which way is, north, south, east, west, unless you know how to use the tools and navigation system, you're fucked. It's not a great feeling. I've had it a few times, but I have to remind myself, no. We're on a trip. We're good. We have a bunch of people here. They're knowledgeable. They're going to get us home safe. Now, take that same feeling of you're fucked because there's water all around you 360. Now, go down deep, real deep, and have that same feeling. Now it's surrounding you entirely, not just in, one plane. XYZ, there's water all around you. And if you don't know how to get home, what are you going to do? Not to mention the fact that you're talking about the atmospheric pressures. And if you go down deep and if you resurface too quickly, then you get what's called the bends.
Yes.
Which is, bubbles forming in your blood that it pretty much is fatal if you're not resurfacing in the correct sequence and if it's not handled the right way, if you do come down with the bends. Because what is it? There's the hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, you need to just go sit in the specialized. It's a hyperbaric chamber that specializes in. Oh bloody hell! It's been a while since I've read up on this. Basically, I think nitrogen bubbles form in your blood, if I remember correctly, and
Correct.
That's a real bad thing.
And I remember on Spike TV back in the day, they used to have there was 1,001 Ways to Die.
Yeah.
And one of the horror stories was the one marine biologist who resurfaced too quickly. She had to go spend time in the hyperbaric chamber, and somebody accidentally opens the door way before the time for her to come out. And she essentially just popped. So,
I don't know if you quite pop like that. I don't think it's that extreme, but
I don't mean like a balloon, like a blood bag, but like something.
That's what I thought you meant.
No, yeah, no. She popped like one of those balloons at the clowns at the boardwalk. The water.
I'm just picturing the famous. I'm picturing the famous shot of from the movie Scanners when the one dude with the mustache when you just see his head explode.
not quite as bad, but I imagine something internally just gives way from the pressure, and if it's not, again, treated correctly, you get some horrible results, and in some cases it's very fatal. So imagine the first person going down deep into the ocean, and they report like, oh, we went down 2,000 feet, and then you come back up. I don't know how many atmospheres as far as depths are concerned, but imagine you go down 2-3 atmospheres safely, and you do your exploration, you find some new things, you get some footage, and then you come back up, and you think everything's fine. All of a sudden, the bends happened. Nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's freaking out. And then you have to speculate as to some kind of a seasickness. Maybe he swallowed some water while he was down there. Maybe he breathed in some air incorrectly, or the air got corrupt in some way. It leads to like a whole bunch of speculation, and it's not a good idea. Granted, we figured it out and have a better idea of how to deal with it and how to treat it. But I just feel bad for the first guy who ever had that happen to them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And now Jen's walking in very sheepishly because she knows that whop sound that we keep hearing in the background. Oh yeah, go ahead. Tiptoe across the studio and put a mute on that one. God damn, this is not getting cut out, by the way.
Hi, Jen.
Doug says hello. As she flips me the double bird and she runs out of the room. At least that's been solved. I think she heard me from the other room. Oh, man. But yeah, again, human beings wanting to explore, wanting to push the envelope. Sometimes for the betterment of mankind. Sometimes just horrible events that are now just, moments in history that we have to look back on and say, well, let's not do that again.
Well, I think this is going to go down, hopefully, as a fine example of hubris. I read somewhere, I think I saw somewhere on Twitter, somebody said, yeah, all over the world right now, physics teachers and physics professors are scrambling to prepare a special lesson for tomorrow. And yeah, I mean, and I think the biggest, unfortunately, the worst takeaways I get from this is, number one, the amount of effort and time and money spent by the Coast Guard, and not just the U.S. Coast Guard, Canadian Coast Guard. And I think the French Navy even sent some help in because they've got some pretty good deep sea exploration equipment over there. And I think the Brits may have even had a hand in the thing. And they spent so much time and they put in so much work searching wherever they could, trying to take care of this one correctly. But one of the other stories from the last couple of days that has been glossed over was there was a ship full of refugees from, I think, Syria trying to make their way to Greece.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were on a fishing boat that was overloaded, and that one went down off the coast of Greece, and hundreds are dead and hundreds are still missing, probably be found to be dead. And yeah, a lot of it had to do with the Greek Coast Guard basically just being negligent on this entire situation. So, and that one's gotten virtually no airtime whatsoever, which is kind of sad.
Isn't it kind of weird? You have a ship that you said is overloaded with all these immigrants, hoping to have a better life, trying to escape whatever life they had previously, and they capsize. A number of them probably underneath the deck, and probably weren't even able to get out as the thing capsized, and they get glossed over. Yet the billionaire with 4 other guys in a submersible, he gets all the fucking news coverage.
And parts of it make sense to me. I mean, this is a bite-sized, somewhat sensationalistic news story, and the Titanic is still fascinating to a lot of people. I mean, you look no further than the fact that people are willing to pay $250,000 to go look at this the hull of a ship that's slowly just coming apart that as the ocean reclaims it.
Look,
but
I have a solution for anybody out there who says, I want to go see the Titanic. They say it's going away. The ocean's going to swallow it up in a few years. If you really want to go visit the Titanic that badly, go buy yourself a pair of VR goggles, load up whatever documentary, sit back. If you want, have somebody splash water on you occasionally, like you feel like you're down there. Have somebody slap you across the face with a mackerel. Enjoy it that way.
Have somebody stand behind you and they can grab the sides of your head and start squeezing it to simulate the pressure, maybe?
Yeah.
They can do like the big Kona Crush spot from the early 90s WWE.
I was going to say, let's just, put out the Kane Hodder. I mean, I'm sure he will do it from his days from being Jason on film. Just, there you go. Just, hand on one side of your melon, crush on the other side. It's just, you can have fun that way until blood starts coming out your tear duct or shooting out your nose. Do that instead. Stay home.
Yeah.
Be safe.
Or exactly. Don't. Yeah, don't do dumb shit.
If you've got the money and you want to spend it that badly, just donate it to somewhere. There's a lot of needy people out there at this point.
Exactly. Yeah, fucking Christ. I mean, there's so many food banks and so many good fucking charities out there that could fucking use the fucking help given the current state of everything going on. So, yeah, what the fuck, motherfucker.
What I want to
So,
know, as far as the billionaire and his son is concerned, what do we know what business he ran or how he came about his money?
um,
I didn't see that one in the news stories.
I don't recall about the Indian father and son. I believe the Brit came out of the banking world, but I don't remember the other two.
Whenever it comes to money of that amount, I always wonder what happens now that they're gone. Like if the life insurance policy says, "Oh, we're not going to pay out because a body was never recovered," and that kind of nonsense that comes after the fact. Like, how do you deal with the fallout of that?
Oh, I'm sure there's precedent for that because rich people have been finding stupid ways to die for as long as there have been rich people.
That sounds like a
No, the
T-shirt
biggest question
almost.
with that is, what's that?
That sounds like a T-shirt almost. Rich people
What
finding
rich
ways to
people?
die.
Oh, finding stupid ways to die since the beginning of rich people.
There you go.
I don't know. I'm sure that their estates will be opened up. Wills will be read. I'm sure whatever's left of OceanGate is going to get deluged with lawsuits,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
probably also bills from assorted like governmental agencies being like, you created this dumbass shit. You're paying the fucking bill for it, asshole. And also, and one of the other things that came up with it too is descendants of people who died on the Titanic have basically come out and said, "Hey, assholes, this is a graveyard where our family members are. Could you maybe not go fucking gawk at it?"
I did see that one pop up a little bit here and there. Yeah, it's like it's again, it's an amazing wreckage. It's an amazing moment in time as far as the
Mhm.
Titanic going down. It's an unfortunate one, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people whose spirit, quote unquote, died there or is laid to rest there for better or worse, depending on how you want to put it. Um, yeah, it is kind of like a memorial in a sense, and it's kind of shitty to to charge somebody a ticket to go down there. Like, hey, look, people died here. Check it out. You good? All right, let's go home. It just it seems very. I mean, it's capitalism, really.
No, you're exactly right. It is what it is. Somebody was like, "I found a way to. I'm going to cash in on this, and let's see what we can get away with." And you know what? And you want to know what the funny thing was? If the guy had fucking actually done his due diligence in terms of getting proper submersibles and having everything constructed right with it, and getting stuff that was properly. You know what? If I was building a submersible to go down to the Titanic, I wouldn't get anything graded for 10,500 feet. Just to be on the safe side, I'd have everything graded for like 15,000 feet. Just to be like, yeah, we're more than safe. This
Yeah,
is designed to take a ton more pressure, but you know what? We're going to be safe. And also on top of that, I'm going to have stuff installed on it that's going to, oh, we're having a problem with something? Okay. Then, yeah, we're going to hit this button over here and drop some ballast, and we're going to just make our way up to the top. And we're also going to have beacons that are going to go off, like with like regulate those. Oh, bloody hell. I can't remember what the contraptions are, but they usually have them attached to um, when a ship sinks and they have them attached to like the lifeboats and stuff like that, the homing beacons.
are you talking about like the buoys,
Yeah, the ones that actually send out a signal that make it easy for them to be tracked when people
transponder?
come looking. There you go, transponders. Thank you. Yeah, I have all kinds of stuff like that. So if something went wrong, it's like, okay, hit this button, hit this button, hit this button, sit tight. We'll be back on the surface in, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then, after we're marked as overdue and since they lost contact with us, yeah, they'll come looking for us pretty quick and they're going to find us quicker than a hiccup. So rather than, safety is overrated, safety is for dummies, or whatever that jackass said.
Well, considering again, as we talked about before, the amount of technology that has been developed and has been implemented in a lot of different ships, whether they're above sea or below sea, um, this thing was very sparse.
Yeah.
Supposedly, like the bathroom was just a bottle that you had to go in, that you had to hold it while you were down there, essentially. So even that, I don't know if that's true. That sounds already uncomfortable. Um, But yeah, the amount of things that could have been included, and I know it costs money, and boo-hoo, it's expensive for the person who's building it. But if you want to have something that can be a deep sea exploration vessel, fucking just do your due diligence. Make sure, not just for yourself, but for your passengers. You want to make sure that you get them home safely every time. And unfortunately, that's not what happened in this case. And I don't know exactly how it went down. Again, we don't know if they asphyxiated. We don't know if we know the oxygen ran out overall. So whatever the case was, that time limit expired. But if there was any kind of implosion, supposedly they said that they wouldn't have felt it. It would happen so quickly they wouldn't even have a chance to register, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But if that's, I mean, still, like, for that brief moment of like, holy shit, and that's it. It's like the blink of an eye, and it's unfortunate. Unfortunate all around. The loss of any kind of human life, especially when it comes to disregard to safety. Again, it's just turned into a joint horrible event in history, so I'm sorry I'm stepping on your territory.
No, welcome aboard, my friend.
But
figuratively and literally.
The more, get us home safe. The more I hear about this story, the more heartbreaking it is every single time you read one of the articles, because all of this could have been prevented. All of this could have been sidestepped if safety measures were just implemented, redundancies were used, any kind of a beacon, something. I mean, I didn't read what the billionaire's last text was, but apparently, like that was like the one thing that they reported on, that there was a text sent out shortly before they went underwater and before they lost contact or a cell signal, whatever the case was. There's got to be a safer way to get down there. I mean, fuck, James Cameron, led multiple explorations down to the Titanic. That's part of what, led his fascination with underwater diving, the Titanic itself, making the movie of the Titanic, getting all the information he needed to recreate certain parts of the ship. He made it out alive. He's a rich motherfucker. Come on.
Yeah, but you kind of get the feeling that he did this intelligently.
Yes, well, he did. For somebody just to say, "Oh, he could do it, so can I," but I can do it less. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So it's frustrating. It's maddeningly frustrating to see that happen. So I don't know. The other thing is, I don't know how much longer this is going to be in the news cycle for. Like, a part of me really, really was hoping that either they were found in time and they can bring them back up safely and then get them out and get them whatever medical treatment, or maybe they did get dislodged had they been stuck and they were able to resurface and they were just bobbing in the sea somewhere waiting for somebody to get to them before the air ran out. Something along those lines I was hoping for, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case. So,
especially too, I wanted these people still to be alive so we could pillory them in public and basically say, "Hey, assholes, fuck you."
I do want to know, and I'm sure it's going to come out eventually, what is the bill for this? It sounds, kind of counterintuitive, but what is the overall cost? As you had mentioned, all the different organizations were mounting rescue efforts, mobilizing crews and teams and equipment. What finally was spent to try to get these guys out? Because you don't hear those same stories when it comes to that other capsized vessel you were talking about, the immigrants. I'm sure there's other rescue efforts going there, and they probably have a better handle on that one because they're not having to go so far down into the ocean. But still, it's just like, I don't know.
No, I'm sure it's ridiculously expensive, but also, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it was millions of dollars. I don't know.
It's going to be something talked about for quite some time, I'm sure. Like, it's whenever something gets lost at sea, or anything of this nature happens, it just always talked about for quite a bit, and then slowly it just fades into memory, and then just becomes another part of history. So
it'll probably be in the news cycle for another couple of days, and then it'll drift off, and we won't hear about anything for a while until. I'm sure there'll be some additional reporting, there'll be some lawsuits and all that kind of nonsense, but then they'll be on to the next thing, especially with all the shit show we have coming in 2024.
Oh, God. Let me deal with this year, all right? I don't want to think about next year just yet.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to get real dumb real quick. But anyway, that's another story for another day.
Absolutely. The other story I do want to talk about, and it's night and day compared to this one, is the premiere and the box office numbers for The Flash. Have you heard about this so far? Have you been
I've
tracking it
heard
at all?
nothing. I've heard nothing good.
What? All right. So, what have you heard so far?
That the CGI looks like shit. Um, there's some semblance of a good storyline in there because this is okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're basically reworking the Flashpoint paradox, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm actually familiar with that to a certain degree because I've read about that comic series, and I remember that was a couple of the DC animated movies, which aren't half bad. They did something with that a couple of years back, but I was told there's like some semblance of a decent movie in there, but you can tell like things just like it's DC. They've been DC films over the last 10 years have made basically a career out of just tripping over their goddamn selves. So
Yeah, it's so I will defend the CG because there are certain scenes where okay, so the premise of the movie itself, just for anybody who has not read the Flashpoint storyline or seen any of the other iterations, because it has been done on the Flash TV series. There have been an animated version of it, which they took some liberties. Again, it was adapted. And then you have this film as well. The idea is essentially that at one point, Barry Allen, the Flash, has access to what's called the Speed Force. And at one point, he learns that if he runs fast enough, he can actually run through space and time, so he can actually time travel. When he comes to this realization, he wants to try to prevent the death of his mother, who was killed by an attacker. And like, depending on which story you read, it's a different version of who kills her. And the fact that they put the blame on his father, because when it's discovered that his mother has been killed, his father is there and has blood all over his hands, and everybody just, for whatever reason, points the finger at him and say they had a disgruntled relationship and he killed her, and he gets sent to prison for a long time. In fact, Barry Allen at one point becomes a crime scene investigator and is trying to solve the murder of his mother and trying to, bring his father to justice. That all being said, he travels back in time when he discovers he has this ability, and he saves his mom. He saves his mom. His dad doesn't have to go to prison. They both are still in his life. He grows up. But he realizes that by doing this one little thing, he's thrown off the entire timeline. He doesn't get powers. He doesn't become the Flash. Members of the Justice League don't come to fruition, so they don't actually occur in the timeline. And things just go sideways. And again, depending on which version you read or watch, different events happen. This one was adapted for the most part, but they play with some of the mechanics of the storyline so that rather than having Thomas Wayne be the Batman in the timeline from the comics and from the animated, they still have Bruce Wayne, but it's a different version of Bruce. That's how they explain the difference when you see Ben Affleck in the beginning of the movie, and then we switch over to Michael Keaton Batman from the 89 Batman. The way they try to explain it, they believe it or not, they use Back to the Future logic. The one scene in the one scene in Back to the Future when Doc is trying to explain what happens, where you have the regular timeline, then you have Marty who goes into the future, returns with the sports almanac, but then when he goes back in time, that change in the timeline where he gives the almanac to Biff. Future Biff gives it to old Biff. It creates a skew in the timeline that creates a tangent and a new timeline occurs. Rather than having that logic, which has been pretty much held up by many people as far as like time travel in movies, but even Avengers Endgame and Infinity War kind of like call it BS. What they say is when you go back in time and you change any event, you're not creating a tangent, you're creating a parallel line. So what happens is you have a new past and a new beginning altogether. And there are certain intersection points, but what happens is when that occurs, rather than it being just timelines, it ends up being like a bowl full of spaghetti. Yeah, some timelines will run in parallel, other ones will overlap in certain times and places, but overall it's just a big bowl of a mess.
Okay.
That's how they explain this. That's how you can still have Bruce Wayne, but it's a different person as Bruce Wayne rather than who we know or other characters for that matter. At that point, they try to figure out how they're going to fix this. And one of the things that they do is they realize, okay, let's find the Justice League. Cyborg hasn't had the car accident and it turns him into Cyborg. For whatever reason, Arthur Curry, Aquaman, is not there. Wonder Woman has not come out. And I can't remember some of the other members that they might have mentioned. But essentially, by Barry switching this one point in time, all the heroes that would have been there to stop the attack from Zod aren't there. And it's the same attack that plays out in the movie of Man of Steel.
Interesting.
When he plays out this whole thing of going back in time, it's funny because he essentially creates this weird time bubble that he's in. And then what they created for the movie, it's called the Time Bowl. So it looks like he's sitting at the bottom of a coliseum, and there's like the different tiers, and for every tier is a different point in time, different timelines that could play out. Now here's where the CGI gets really weird, because it doesn't seem like they decided to finish it fully, or they left it unfinished for certain aesthetics. Because it's not a fully formed timeline, it's not a fully formed thing yet until he leaves the time bubble. You have to see it to get a better understanding of it, but it looks like CGI that hasn't been fully rendered yet. The details aren't there, the contours aren't really there, some of the lines are missing. It's just, they look like early versions of video games where it's like, okay, that's acceptable for what it was, but they could improve upon it later on. They say it was left like this purposely. I can see the idea behind that. As far as the storyline, yes, the storyline for Flashpoint is a good storyline. The fact that Flash wants to try to save his family and makes this change, even though he was pretty much warned not to do it. At least in the movie he was. I don't remember if anybody in the comics or animated warned him ahead of time. You know, he's trying to be a hero and saving his mom. But by doing that, he screws up the rest of the world.
Okay.
But because of the way this was written, the beginning of the movie doesn't know if it wants to be a comedy or, a dramatic superhero movie. Because there's a lot of comedic beats. Ezra Miller plays a very awkward, shy Barry Allen. So whenever he tries to interact with people, he's very awkward and silly and stupid, and some bad jokes are played here and there. In fact, oh my God, the one scene that you have to watch to really understand it. The beginning of the movie, he is asked by Alfred to help out Batman because there's a situation happening at one of the hospitals. Some criminals are making away with some virus. They're fleeing in an armored van. So Batman's in pursuit, but Barry has to get all the people out of the hospital, at the very least, make sure that none of the gas lines or electric cause further damage or possible explosions. Barry Allen at this point is communicating with Alfred and says, I've noticed that I've become the janitor of the Justice League, and every time I get called upon, I have to clean up a mess. More specifically, it's a Batman mess. Pretty much laying the groundwork for the movie itself. At this point, Alfred warns him, the East Wing is about to collapse. Flash is like, no, I just did everything. Everything seems fine. Sure enough, the East Wing collapses. On one of the floors is the nursery, which 5 or 6 babies go flying out of a window, along with a nurse. And at this point now, Flash has to find a way to run up the debris. Remember the one scene from, I think it was Days of Future Past? Or, no, not Days of Future Past, which is the one with Quicksilver, where they have him...
the Phoenix one?
Not the Phoenix one. It was
Apocalypse?
Apocalypse, yes.
Okay.
In Days of Future Past, I think they had a Quicksilver scene. The Apocalypse movie had the better scene, as he's saving everybody from the mansion. Essentially, they took that and said, we can do one better. So now here's Flash trying to run up the different pieces of debris, but then he sees as all these different objects are falling down near or around the babies, and they're about to get killed. So one has a bunch of sharp surgical instruments flying towards its face in slow motion. The baby is unaware and cooing and laughing the entire time. Another one has a tank of oxygen that's pointed towards the baby with the valve, and a flame that's about to hit the valve, causing a large flamethrower essentially to happen, and a bunch of other nonsense is happening as well. Flash at one point is running low on power, so he needs the power up. He finds a vending machine falling through the sky. He jumps up, breaks the window of the vending machine, eats all the candy he can real fast. Now he's got all his energy back due to his heightened metabolism. He then proceeds to save the babies. He takes one baby, sticks it into a falling microwave, closes the door, safe from the fire. The tank of oxygen that now shoots off to the side knocks out all the different sharp implements. The other baby's safe. He's able to save the different babies. He's able to save the nurse that's also falling. Then he finds a service dog falling through the sky and saves it as well. He gets them all down safely. Like I said, you have to see this to believe this. This is the opening montage, or opening, I should say, action piece to show what the Flash can do. And it's played more for comedic beats than action or drama. It's silly as hell. I don't know if I really enjoyed it, but by the end of it, I'm like, okay, well, that happened. All the babies are safe. The one baby's in the microwave. Even though the microwave's not connected, you still hear a ding when the door pops open. It's silly as fuck.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Whoa.
The movie has no clue where it wants to, rest its head. It starts off silly, over the top. Then you do the whole timeline thing. And then when he meets the past version of himself, more nonsense occurs, more jokes, more silliness happens. He accidentally transfers his power over to young Barry as he's trying to recreate the accident so the timeline doesn't get messed up in that respect. So older Barry, or our Barry as we first meet him in the movie, has to try to find a way to get his powers back. The one Justice League member that they can find is Superman. Or at least they believe it's Superman, because it's the one he raids Batman's computer and initially finds that an extraterrestrial fell to Earth and is being held in a Soviet prison. When they get to the Soviet prison, I mean, this is all spoilers, by the way. If anybody hasn't seen the movie, or, don't listen to the rest of this. I spoiled the opening scene already. Fuck off. When they get to the Soviet prison, they get there and they find out it's not Kal-El that they're looking for, but Barry still wants to save the prisoner, who looks emaciated and weak. Come to find out it's Kara Zor-El, so they bring her out, and as soon as she gets subjected to the sun, her powers kick in and she starts healing. Which is great because they need that as they're trying to escape the Soviet prison, and all these soldiers are now firing at them. Michael Keaton Batman gets amazing set pieces where he just showcases, one, how badass he is, two, using gadgets. And it's funny because at one point when he's trying to open the cell that houses what they thought was Kal-El, he pulls out a flip phone with a little keypad, and he's sitting there trying to type in different codes. And then Barry Allen at one point goes, he's gonna hack the thing with a flip phone, and then the other Barry decides to use his powers just to use every single combination, and then they crack it open immediately. Little jokes like that are fun. Once they finally get Kara back, up to full strength, the whole Zod thing is playing out in the background. It's very reminiscent of Man of Steel. Everything's happening. Only that this time, they're looking for Kara. They're not looking for Kal. Come to find out, in this timeline, Zod has already killed Kal-El. Kills him as an infant. So you never have a Superman in this world.
Oh, okay.
Nice little touch for that one. I appreciate it. If anybody who hasn't seen Man of Steel, the idea was when Krypton was destroyed, the codex for all of life on Krypton was left in Kal-El, and that was the whole idea of Zod coming to Earth, trying to grab the codex, terraform Earth, and recreate Krypton on Earth at the expense of all human life. When he does it this time around, Kal-El doesn't have it. They're still going to do the whole world engine and terraforming, only that he needs to get it from Kara. Now, there's a lot of cool set pieces that happen in the fights and leading up to the final battles, but the best part about this is that the heroes lose. And when I say they lose repeatedly. So At one point, Barry, young Barry and older Barry, they try their best to fight off the army of Zod. But no matter what they do, Kara dies, Michael Keaton Batman dies, They try to go back in time to give themselves that extra little bit, and now they know what's going to happen, so they think they can do it. Over and over and over again, Zod kills Kara. Batman dies. They can't avoid it. Older Barry realizes what's happening and says, we have to stop running, because if we keep doing this, we're just going to destroy the timeline. Now, here's where the movie really shines. Because they play, and this is, all right, remember when we talk about wrestling, WWE kind of like likes to forget its history and past. They almost kind of like penalize you for remembering things. But companies like Chikara love to reward you for the history that you remember.
Yeah.
This movie rewards you for being a comic book fan and a fan of the movies. At one point, as they're trying to fix the timeline, because younger Barry's convinced that if they run back in time over and over again, they will have an opportunity to eventually win. Older Barry realizes, fuck, I'm screwing up the timeline the more we did this. I already did this by saving my mom. I have to let our mom die. Younger Barry refuses. You see the tears in the fabric in space when they're in the time bowl. When that happens, you see different worlds start to float in orbit of one another. If I remember this correctly, the first one you see is like a black and white sphere. As you come up closer on it, you see George Reeves' Superman standing there in all his glory. The effect is done in a way so that it's a flickering light, so it almost looks like a film projection. And again, the CGI is not perfect, but it's him. You can tell without a doubt it's George Reeves recreated from CGI. You keep going through, you find another planet. This planet has the silhouette of a Superman landing on a rooftop. As he lands, you see it's Christopher Reeves, Superman. And just as that happens, another figure lands next to him. It's Helen Slater, Supergirl. All CGI.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Fucking awesome. The next one you see is another Superman, again, all silhouette, Superman with long hair, flowing cape, fighting a Thanagarian snare beast.
No.
It's
really?
Nick Cage Superman fighting off the Thanagarian snare beast, the unrealized project from Kevin Smith and Tim Burton from back in the day. And what was the name of the guy? Peter...
John Peters.
John Peters, thank you. The producer who just wanted, no matter what, you had to have Superman fight this giant spider because it's the king of the insect world, whatever the case was. I'm paraphrasing.
He's the most vicious killer in the insect kingdom.
Thank you.
It's funny that came up. I actually just recently rewatched that clip of that story like 2-3 weeks ago.
For anybody who wants more information on it, there was a documentary that was released a few years back called The Death of Superman Lives by, I want to say it was John Schnepp. I don't know if I'm getting the first name correct, but Schnepp was his last name. The gentleman has unfortunately passed away since, but it's a beautiful look at what could have been, not just from when Kevin Smith first wrote the script to when Tim Burton then took it over and just did away with the script, and the whole behind the scenes. You even get to see Nick Cage do a test fitting for the outfit. So he has the long hair, the costume, everything. That's what they recreate in CG for this one scene. You see him defeat the snare beast, and as each one is facing towards the camera, they're facing towards a rip in time and space, so they see the two Flashes standing there. Go a little bit further, you see another world spinning around, and you see an Adam West Batman running like down a hallway, and you hear the cackle of either the Joker or the Riddler in the background. So you're getting all these little pieces that are put together, and then suddenly you realize that the Flashes are watching these worlds begin to collide and destroy one another. So by doing what they're doing, they're fucking up the world. That's where the story gets really, really interesting. That's the crux of the Flashpoint movie at that point. Because they're destroying the multiverse, and this is like the first time you're really seeing the multiverse play out. They have to find a resolution for it. Again, older Barry realizes he has to let his mom die to reset the timeline to what it was. Younger Barry not wanting to let go. For anybody else, I won't go any further as far as the storyline. It gets really, really exciting. But to say the least, at the very end, when you think everything's all set and done, and we're back to status quo, When Barry goes back to his timeline and goes about his business as usual, he gets a call from Bruce Wayne. And he goes, "Oh, I did this, and I know you told me not to, but I did it anyway, and I screwed it up, but I fixed it. I think everything's back to normal." You hear Bruce Wayne say, "I'll be right there. I'm pulling up right now." So right outside the courthouse, you see this nice sports car pull up, and of course all the reporters rush towards the car. So you've had Ben Affleck Batman, then you had Michael Keaton Batman. You're expecting Ben Affleck Batman to step out of the sports car. Who do you think steps out of the sports car?
Not George Clooney.
George Clooney Batman steps out of the sports car.
Oh, wow. That's bonkers. That is so wacky.
He comes forward. Flash has no clue what the fuck's happening. He goes, "Who the hell are you? You're not Batman." And then he looks at him like, chill out. Like, don't fucking tell everybody. And that's essentially where they leave it. So this movie had cameo after cameo after cameo. Of course, a lot of them were CGI. Tamara Morrison, who played Thomas Curry, Arthur Curry's father, who lives in the lighthouse. He makes a brief appearance. Gal Gadot makes appearance as Wonder Woman early on with the hospital scene. I'm trying to remember who else off the top of my head. I'm blanking. But for what it's worth, this is a fun movie. It doesn't know what it wants to be. In that regard, it makes it very crazy and very clunky is the best way I can put it. But once you finally get to the whole thing of the multiverse and them trying to find a way to solve it and fix it, that's where the story lies. And that's where it's good. Outside of that, you're just like, what are they doing? Is Barry like awkward and funny, or is this like the coming of age superhero movie? Not to mention the fact that if I were to pick a Flash story to tell, Flashpoint Paradox would not be the first one. Like, you have to have a lot of knowledge of DC Comics lore and DC movie lore to piece together everything that's going on in this film. If you're not caught up on any of that stuff, you are penalized heavily, and you need somebody to tell you what's happening, or just look it up yourself, whatever the case is. But they pull on a lot of the different past movies. They try their best just to, tell a fun story. And overall, I mean, it's getting great reviews because it is a fun movie. It's not as dark and as grim as other DC outings have been in the past. But that's also marred with the personal issues of Ezra Miller and what he's done in recent years. And the time that this was filmed, there was a lot of legal trouble he got into. It made a lot of headlines in the news. Some of the public outbursts he's had, some of the grooming he's done with younger kids, assault, breaking and entering. I mean, if you want to look it up, go for it. It's a crazy deep dive as far as what was going on. Safe to say that he is getting treatment and therapy. I don't know to what extent, but that's what it was reported. And when they were doing the press for this movie, it was not Ezra Miller at the forefront. He made an appearance at the premiere, and that was pretty much limited. But a lot of the press has been done by, I don't want to get her name wrong again, Sasha Calle, who plays Supergirl.
Oh, okay.
If you haven't, you've seen the trailers, correct?
No, actually I have not.
Okay, do me a favor. When we're done with this, and this is for anybody who's listening as well, look up Supergirl in this movie. I don't want to hear, it's not a blonde-haired Supergirl, it doesn't look like Melissa Benoist, or it doesn't look like Helen Slater. This is probably one of the sexiest, strongest, and most captivating Supergirls has been put on screen, in my opinion. The costume looks amazing. She looks great. She does a great portrayal. Henry Cavill, who apparently filmed a cameo scene, but it got cut.
Yeah.
Says, gives her his blessing, like his nod, more or less, as to her portrayal of the character. Like, it all works out very, very well. I was surprised, and I'm very happy that she was able to get the role, which apparently was being sought after by two other actors. But due to restrictions due to the pandemic, they were not able to make it. So she was given the role based off of her auditions and everything else. And both Gal Gadot and Melissa Benoist reached out to her to congratulate her because they loved what she was doing as far as the auditions and chemistry and everything else. So
Hmm.
it was a well received role for this actor, and I'm happy the portrayal on screen, everything looked great, especially considering everything else that had gone on with Ezra Miller and everything else. There was like a shining point in there. And then let's not forget Michael Keaton Batman, which seeing him back on screen as Batman is just fucking awesome.
That's pretty wild. Yeah.
I can't remember. I think he's like in his 70s now.
Oh God, yeah, he's got to be up there by now.
But
So, yeah.
you know what? Besides the the mouth area where his face is exposed, the costume hides a lot of it. I mean, granted, also there's a lot of CGI for his fight scenes and when he's jumping or gliding through the air, but they do a great job of making him a strong Batman in this case. Then, of course, there's the story of Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays Thomas Wayne in the beginning of, I believe it was Batman v Superman,
Yeah.
saying that, hey, Michael Keaton essentially just stole my role, but it's all good. Because, again, if you play Thomas Wayne in that one, the storyline originally calls for Thomas Wayne to be Batman in this universe. But what happens in that case is that Bruce Wayne dies in the alleyway, not his parents. Thomas Wayne goes on to be Batman of that world, but he uses guns. And Martha Wayne becomes the Joker of that world. So that's a fun read if anybody wants to go to the comics for that one. That happens. And there's this whole Atlantean war that happens as well with the humans. It just becomes craziness. So, again, the comics has a lot of stuff that is not in the movies. The movie had to cut a lot of story elements to make it work.
And which comic series was it where that happened with Thomas Wayne being Batman and Martha Wayne becoming the Joker?
That is the Flashpoint storyline.
Oh, gotcha.
I believe
Okay.
that was in 2011. I believe it was just the Flash. I don't know if it branched out to other books.
Okay.
But the animated version of the Flashpoint Paradox, again, follows a lot of different points. It's a little truncated for what it is, but also does a good adaptation of it. So overall, fun movie. I can see why the fans are enjoying it. I can see why the critics are panning it. But I feel bad because at this point, had this movie hit its numbers, because let's see, where was it at? Budget for the movie was somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $220 million. Again, that's just the budget. That's not advertising. A lot more goes into advertising, not to mention the fact that this movie sat on the shelf for a while. Again, another pandemic movie and all nonsense and craziness. So it'd been filmed for quite some time and sat, and nobody knew what was happening with it for a bit. The box office currently stands at $144 billion.
Okay, so if that's going to break even or make anything, it's got a long ways to go.
Very long way. Apparently the opening for this one was below Black Adam. That was another flop from DC recently. And also Shazam! Fury of the Gods. If you haven't seen that one, okay, so backwards a little bit. Black Adam, not that good of a movie. Even though it's got The Rock and a strong supporting cast, falls really short of what it's supposed to be. That happens, when The Rock wanted to take the reins and tell his version of the story. And eventually he wanted Black Adam and Superman to eventually have a face-off. He wanted to sidestep Shazam altogether. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is actually a fun movie. I watched it. We watched it on Max or HBO Max, whatever it was at the time. And I was pleasantly surprised in how goofy it is, how fun it is, but it's a movie that I could watch with my son. In fact, we did. And I'll share this one for you because it was a fantastic, funny moment for us. There's a cameo, not once, but twice, by Wonder Woman. The first time you don't see her face, so you're like, oh, they just got some actress to play Wonder Woman and dressed her up in the costume. At the very end of the movie, Gal Gadot actually shows up on screen and talks and has lines and interacts with Shazam. My son at this point goes, they're in the same world? And I just let out this gut laughter. I'm like, oh my God, this is your first moment of a crossover. Holy shit.
Wow. Yeah.
It blew his little mind to see Shazam his foster brothers and sisters who all shared in the power, so they were all like versions of Shazam of their own. Standing there with Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, he could not fathom that they were on the screen at the same time. So I'm kind of wondering what it's going to be like when he watches The Flash. Different story for that one.
Here's the big question for you.
Sure.
Is it for somebody who's a bit more of a casual when it comes to this kind of stuff? Is this worth a watch?
I'm going to answer this in two ways.
Okay.
Yes, it's worth a watch. I don't know if I can actually say go watch it in the theaters. This one, and I know people are saying, oh, we have to go back to the theaters, we have to support movies. This one might be one that you can wait for it to come home, only because, again, it's so crazy as far as the storyline and how they structure it. Like, again, it doesn't know if it wants to be funny or serious. So some of the beats just feel off. So for that one, if you're not a fan, like you're saying, a casual fan, I guess, of the comics and of the movies, then I would say wait for it to come at home. Because there's a lot of stuff that it's gonna go over your head. You're gonna be, what the fuck's going on? But is it worth a watch? Absolutely. Should you go to spend money in the theaters? That's debatable. And I say that with the idea that apparently the failure or flop of this film apparently steals from us another film. And that is the long rumored Batman Beyond film that's been talked about for quite some time.
Batman Beyond. Okay.
Batman Beyond is the story of an older Bruce Wayne who can no longer put the costume on, realizes that his days are numbered, and rather than continue to fight the crime in Gotham, finds another individual, once again a younger individual, and in the form of Terry McGinnis, and outfits him with a high-tech bat suit, which allows him to fight Gotham and all its criminals in the future. And the animated series ran for 3 seasons, was really, really good, told a good storyline. Batman Beyond Return of the Joker is a fun film to watch. They fill in a lot of the gaps as far as backstory.
Mm-hmm.
But because of this movie not doing so well, the live action version of this film is also being either canceled or at the very least put on hold for quite some time, which is a shame because they were talking about at one point that Kevin Conroy could play older Bruce Wayne live action, which is something that fans were kind of in for, especially since he got a chance to portray live action Bruce Wayne on the Flash TV show, especially when he did the crossover for Infinite Crisis. And then with his passing, people kept talking about, oh, Michael Keaton, he's going to be coming back as Batman. He filmed his role in the Batgirl movie that was shelved that we talked about, which will never be seen until they decide to release it in some shape or form. At least theatrically, it's not coming out. But they're saying, oh, you can easily get Michael Keaton. He's already got the gray hair, get him out there, whatever, gussy him up, and then just pick somebody for Terry McGinnis. And you can tell a new part of the Batman franchise. But again, this movie, and I can't remember, there was another one that apparently got affected by the box office of The Flash. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, are you familiar with the director, Andy Muschietti?
No, I am not.
Apparently, this is his first big superhero movie. Previous to this, he did horror movies. I'm not familiar with the name, and I'm also not that well versed in horror directors, so I couldn't tell you what he had done in the past.
Yeah, I can't tell you much of anything about them either, truth be told.
Okay. He was asked, again, because of all the legal troubles that Ezra Miller got into, would he work with Ezra Miller again? And he said that absolutely, if we were to get a sequel and if we were to continue to push forward with this, he would love to work with Ezra because Ezra did such a great job with the character. I will say this, Ezra Miller playing a older version and a younger version, a mature version and a silly, awkward version, he put in a lot of performance for this character. Because there's a lot of scenes where it's just Ezra on Ezra. It's just playing off of that, whatever shenanigans they had to do to make it happen. Body doubles, filming each scene on opposite ends, whatever the case was, it works. It does feel funny and serious when it has to be, but it's unfortunate that he had so many troubles in his own personal life that, it's kind of marred the whole idea. So really what it comes down to, as far as box office is concerned, I think a lot of the people, like, especially if you want to talk about social justice warriors, they're upset with Ezra Miller, so they don't want to support the film. Number one. It's unfortunate, but that's just what it is. Executives for Warner Brothers Discovery were saying that, by the time this movie comes out, people will have forgotten his past troubles, and they'll see past it, and the movie will be that good, it'll stand on its own. Doesn't seem to be the case. Also, let's not forget that 2 weeks prior to this, Spider-Man Across the Universe came out from Sony Pictures, and apparently that is the best superhero movie to date. At least that's what a lot of people have said. I have not seen it myself, but from a lot of other reviews and comments, that movie does a fantastic job telling the story of Miles Morales and that storyline that plays out.
Got it.
So that's about it. So if you're going to watch it, if you can find a discount night, go for it. If you can wait for it to come to home video, which, let's face it, at this point, will probably be like in 2-3 months. I wouldn't doubt you'll see it for rent or buy on streaming platforms. That's probably the way to go, but I was surprised. I did not expect it to be as good as it was going to be. Again, with some of the past DC movies, I was pleasantly surprised. I was a little put off by certain parts, but being a DC fan, or just a comic fan in general, I enjoyed it. And I wish it wasn't held down by all these other things, but if you want to talk about the front office shenanigans, as far as like some of the directors and producers and studio heads that played into the whole Justice League debacle, that kind of also echoes in this one a little bit. I remember seeing the name of Walter Hamada as one of the producers in the credits, and as soon as I saw it, when I cringed a little bit, I'm like, oh, that's a name that didn't get a lot of love during the Justice League, especially when Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had their trial. His name got thrown in a couple times. I'm like, oh, this is just a lot of nonsense, a lot of drama that's needlessly clinging to this and just weighing it down further. So it's unfortunate, but that's my take. Good enough?
Good enough. I think more than good enough.
All right, sir. I think I've rambled on far too long.
I think we put our work in for the evening.
Absolutely. With that said, we talked about submersibles. We talked about horrible events. We talked about The Flash. I think we've had our fill. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez. You're a jerk.
Oh, I don't know. We never did it that way before. You're messing me up here.
I know. I'm trying things.
I'm Doug.
Thank you for listening. We are the Rabblecast.